All right, folks, I got to get my take in on the disastrous escalation in Ukraine before it turns into disaster. Um, Here's what I think is going on here. Here's what I think the Biden administration is trying to accomplish. They are working in coordination with the British, with Keir Starmer, who is a even more sinister figure than Joe Biden. Of course, Joe Biden himself, as we all know, has been a figurehead for the entirety. He just represents a certain faction in Washington, a faction which is in, let's just say, they're feeling more threatened now than ever with the election of Donald Trump. There are promises that the spooks, the foreign policy establishment, that they are going to be kneecapped, let's say, by the incoming Trump administration. There are a lot of outsiders being brought into the Trump administration who will be handling matters of foreign policy and intelligence, namely Tulsi Gabbard. But even the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, even though he's far from like a Ron Paul isolationist, he's someone who's evolved over the years and become more of a realist, let's say, as time goes on. And so even though I don't see him as some ultra dove, by my standards, the typical folks in Washington are still appalled by his appointment. He is, at the very least, very critical of the war in Ukraine and does not think that it is in America's best interest to be continuing to fuel this conflict in Europe, the largest war on the European continent, the deadliest war on the European continent since World War II. Even incoming Secretary of State Marco Rubio, he voted against sending more money to Ukraine, which is, that's big coming from him, considering that Rubio, when he got to Washington and for most of his career there, he has been, immersed in, in the neocon clique. He was someone who was much more in the mold of John McCain. But he's still young, he has ambition, and he wants a political future, and he understands the winds have changed since the Bush years, and that the American right, the place that he calls his political home, it has changed. And and even Marco Rubio, because he wants to have a future, is willing to change along with it. And so none of these people really have shown much promise for Project Ukraine moving forward. And so on the way out the door, the architects of Project Ukraine, the Biden administration, they've decided to authorize Ukraine to use what do they call ATACMS, ATACMs. I forget what the exact acronym stands for, but this is the heaviest weaponry from America that the Biden administration has authorized to be used against Russia on Russian soil. These are American missiles that are going to be fired from Ukraine to strike Russia. And this is a massive escalation that Putin in the past has warned he would regard as an act of war. If you have a country that, let's say Ukraine, okay, a country that is launching military strikes inside of Russia and is only able to do so because of arms provided by a third country, in this case the United States, well, then Russia would consider the United States to be a party to that attack on Russian soil. Ergo, the United States has attacked Russia, according to their own doctrine. We all know what would happen if the roles were reversed. And Russia, under our doctrine, under our understanding, our logic, had committed an act of war on American soil. We would be at war with Russia. It would not even be a question. And so we are lucky that, as of yet, the Russian Federation has not responded. But we don't know that they're not going to. We also don't know that this was the only attack that Ukraine plans to launch on Russia between now and Inauguration Day, which will be the first chance that the Trump administration will have to reign in Ukraine. But until then, the Biden administration will be using Ukraine as a proxy to wage total war on the Russian Federation. And so the clear intention here is not to try and, achieve some fictitious victory over Russia in the next, 45 days? Or no, it's like 60 days, isn't it? Anyway, 2 months. Oh, yeah, isn't it like November 20th now? We've got 2 months. We've got about 60 days until Trump takes office. Ukraine is not going to win the war in that time. And so all they can hope to achieve in the meantime is to escalate to such a degree that the Trump administration has no ability to de-escalate, has no path to withdraw. The Biden administration and the Zelensky regime are attempting to bomb not just Russia, but they're attempting to bomb any off-ramp that the United States has to exit this disastrous war. They are attempting to suck the United States into a quagmire from which we will never recover. A quagmire which has no bottom and only leads to nuclear war. And so what I think this will look like, it will not be that Putin is going to suddenly start bombing America in retaliation. No, I don't think that that's what they're trying to achieve. And I don't know that Putin is going to take the bait. He may just try and explain to the Russian people that, this may be humiliating to be attacked by American weapons right now, but they're trying to bait us because this is a lame duck administration and Biden will be gone soon. And so it's not in our best interest to respond at this point. I don't know. Hopefully Putin will be able to make that case to his constituents. But if not, here's what I think the Biden administration is looking to achieve. They want to provoke a retaliation, a heavy retaliation from the Russians against Ukraine. Perhaps a tactical nuclear retaliation. Earlier today, the United States announced that they were evacuating their embassy in Kiev. Now, apparently, they're going to resume regular business tomorrow, but they were all talking about, hey, there's a potential for a Russian strike on Kiev. And throughout this whole war, the U.S., I don't believe, has ever closed their embassy in Kiev. They'd stayed open this whole time. And so it may be that there really was a serious risk that Putin was going to retaliate today and didn't. But nonetheless, whether it happens today, tomorrow, or any time in the next 60 days, that is the goal. They want the Russians to do something so drastic that it makes it impossible for the incoming administration to pull out of this conflict. Now, that could be, just something that looks really bad on TV. Russia could obliterate the Ukrainian capital, level it. Now, do I think that Russia wants to do that? No, because in the eyes of Putin, I think he sees Kiev as a historic Russian city. But this attack could take many different forms. Perhaps they're hoping that Russia could attack U.S. troops somewhere else in Europe. anything that could be seen as an escalation by Russia against the United States. Something that they could spin as an act of Russian aggression. And so therefore boxing in Trump so that if he de-escalates, if he backs out of the war in Ukraine, if he does anything to counter the interests of the Ukraine lobby, of the military-industrial complex, he will then be declared an unabashed Putin puppet once again. In a normal country, this is something that would be considered so beyond the pale, so outrageous, that the Biden administration would be condemned universally. Biden would go down in history as a disgraceful, duplicitous president, seditious even, someone who was trying to subvert, clearly, the results of an election which occurred just a couple weeks ago, and do so in the most serious manner possible, trying to suck the United States into a nuclear war. But instead, we have Congress arguing about tranny restrooms in the year of our Lord 2024. I mean, this is what people were arguing about back in 2015 with the North Carolina bathroom bill. You know, like I get, okay, yeah, the culture war stuff. I'm not saying you should surrender on the culture war issues. I'm not a cuck for the trannies, okay? But Nancy Mace is a fraud. There, I said it. Anyway, I'm not getting into that right now. But Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, he's getting pressured. He got pressured successfully, you know, to not back down on the tranny issue and to not mince words. He came out and he said something tough, and he's like, you know, a man is a man and a woman's a woman, and a man can't become a woman, and everyone cheered, right? But he says nothing about the Biden administration, the outgoing administration, clearly trying to provoke a nuclear war in tandem with the current Labour government in Britain, who simultaneously, as the Biden administration authorized the use of ATACMs, authorized, what are they called, Storm Shadow missiles, I guess a similar, even longer range product from Britain. They authorized the Ukrainians, yeah, go ahead and use those inside Russia. And guess what happened today? Ukraine used those inside of Russia too. And so this is by far the most important issue in the country for the next 60 days. Nobody should be talking about really anything else. There is nothing that is more important than this. If Trump was assassinated tomorrow, it would be less significant than if the Biden administration were successful in their ploy of sucking the United States into a hot war with Russia that we could not extract ourselves from. That would be a bigger deal. Then again, it's not like there's much public focus on the failed near-miss assassination attempts against President Trump either. Those are also two very major historical events that were just swept under the rug, basically. They're completely gone from the zeitgeist. Nobody was even thinking about them really by Election Day. And there were two of them. There were two back-to-back assassination attempts on the now president-elect. I mean, we are truly living in insane times. So anyway, I hope that this is as transparent and clear to the Russians as it is to us. I hope that the Russians care because, I mean, as far as the Russians are concerned, I mean, I know this is how we would treat any other country. If there were multiple political factions and one faction that was on their way out decided to start a war with America, you think that the United States is going to just allow that and say, oh, we'll wait until the new administration is in, and then we'll be friends with you and we'll just tolerate these attacks until then? No, that wouldn't happen. That would not happen. So again, we are relying on the absurd restraint of Vladimir Putin, something that that we've had to rely on in the past. Same thing with Iran. Immense restraint from the Iranians over the past few years, that I've been following global conflicts. So I'll keep an eye on this, but there's certainly plenty else to talk about that's going on, aside from the dangers of World War III. So with that said, I will see you folks back here in the next one.